Hi, this is Pat Gaughan, manager of the Ubuntu server and Openstack team. We're here on our first session of the Ubuntu Developer Summit, June 2014, and today I'm very fortunate to have the whole Ubuntu server, the whole Openstack team, development team here on the Hangout. So we're going to talk today about Openstack Charms, talk about some of the development we have underway for this cycle.
Hi, this is Pat Gaughan.
Okay. Wait, if you've got it playing, stop it.
We're here on our first session.
Corey, that's you.
And I'm very fortunate to have
Okay. All right, thanks. All right, so first thing we're going to talk about is the charm process, which we're trying to introduce a new process to improve the quality of the charms that are in the field. So, James, do you want to briefly describe the process?
Sure. So, kind of background to this was that Openstack being a fairly core part of anybody's infrastructure, it's fairly important that the charm stays stable, so that you can upgrade or deploy from the charms in the charm store at any given point in time and have some level of assurance that they're actually going to work. We've had a few minor breaks and niggles in the past, nothing too significant, but we felt we wanted to put a bit more process and control around when significant change, other than bug fixes, gets delivered into the charms in the charm store. So what we're intending on doing, and I've pasted what we are doing, not intending on doing, I've pasted the link to the policy doc into the header pad. Is we're going to start delivering change during the development cycle, not directly into the charm store, but into a set of /next branches that are owned by the Openstack Charms team. These are kind of designed as a kind of an integration branch that we use during the development cycle. So any new changes, whether they be bug fixes or significant features, need to be proposed against the next branches. And they'll be reviewed as normal by a member of the Openstack Charms team and merged if they look good. And then we'll try and we'll do regular testing against those branches during the dev cycle. And towards the end of the cycle, we'll do increased level of testing, make sure we're doing the kind of regressions and making sure everything upgrades okay, that sort of stuff as well, prior to then promoting those changes into the main charm store branches. That's kind of it in a nutshell. This is the first cycle we run with it, so I expect we'll find some interesting features of the process that we haven't thought about. I guess the most significant change is if you want to get a fix into the charm store for a charm that's already there, or stable fix, calling them, refine a kind of very similar process to the Ubuntu SRU process. And there needs to be a bug, there needs to be a way of reproducing the problem. Changes need to land into next first, and then they can be cherry-picked into the stable branch as a one-off fix for a particular issue. It's probably acceptable to introduce small new features or changes into the stable branches, but they can't change default, can't change default behavior, they can't change default config, and they obviously can't break them. So I think they'll just be reviewed on a case-by-case basis, whether they're appropriate for inclusion or not. The other thing that we are including that you can include are unit and system tests via amulets, which I know Corey and Ryan are going to talk about in a minute, so I won't go into that in too much detail. But anything that helps us verify the stability of a stable charm is really good. So again, they need to land into next first. We can include tests into our stable branch if that's good.
Now, James, if someone wants to use the next branch, how do they go about using that?
At the moment, they have to branch them locally, so they're not addressable through the charm store. And I think that's due to a limitation in the charm store import process that it can only import a single branch per team or user on Launchpad. It can't import multiple ones, because the actual trunk branches, so the trunk branches are owned by the Openstack Charms team. It won't import the next ones as well. It would be quite nice to have those deployable from the charm store, so you don't have to branch the charms locally. do, I'll pick up an action to see if we can either rejig things or get the charm store to ingest things in a different way. I don't know whether that's possible, so give me an action to do that. Cool. Any other questions?
I thought I had another, but I can't remember what it is. So, no, I don't think so. Not for me. I think this is really good. I think this is great to add this process. So so I think anything else, James, on that topic? Else I'll move on.
I don't think so.
Okay, so Corey, Ryan, I know that you guys are doing a lot of work to improve the testing in our Openstack Charms this cycle, so I was hoping you could talk a little bit about it, so I'll let you guys take the floor.
Sure, be happy to. So Corey has been working pretty diligently on kind of extending something called Amulet. We have some new classes that have been in development to be able to directly test against these charms that we have, where we can kind of do some introspection and integrated testing with the various charms surrounding OpenStack. Things that we can do would be to add services, check relationships, configure services, do deployment testing and upgrade testing eventually. And so these things are actively in development right now using Python and the Amulet framework. So basically we have a schedule of charm tests that we're developing right now, and so we've got, did I drop?
No, you're still here.
Okay, I heard a clink, and then my screen went gone. Okay, so our goal is to be able to run automated testing naturally against these charms and ultimately against the next branches with series and release testing covering trusty Icehouse and then also precise Icehouse back to Folsom and targeting even Essex for a time, I believe. And James, you might jump in on that. I think that might be falling off at some point.
So Essex will fall off. Essex won't fall off for another 2.5 years.
Right. Okay. We're on for till 2017, aren't we?
Yeah. But Folsom, Grizzly, and Havana drop off in about a month and a half's time. So, and it doesn't hurt to have the test in there still for a certain period of time after that. But often there are things that can be disabled then.
Yeah. So
but then we'll in 4 months' time we'll have new ones coming in. So it's having this practice.
And so anyway, yeah, thank you, James. Back to the kind of the overall goal with the charm testing in our Amulet framework. Again, is to run tests against Trunk and against the next branches of our own charms. So we're really testing two things. We're testing the charms themselves, as well as the updates as they come through from OpenStack upstream. And Corey, if you've got some more information, I think we can kind of bounce back and forth a bit and just kind of have some discussion around, what we think is next and where we are with this.
Sure. Yeah. All right. Yeah, I'll dig in. I'll just dig in a little bit more about what Amulet is and what it does. Amulet is something that was developed by Marco Seppi, and it provides a Python library, among other ways to use it, but you can use it from the command line too. But for OpenStack Charms, we're using the Python library to do introspection of charms. So basically, as a whole, Amulet provides the testing harness for writing vUDS charms, and it also provides the harness part that allows you to execute the tests, and it returns success failure, so you don't have to mess, with developing any of that stuff. as Ryan mentioned, the initial part of Amulet is it gives you the ability to deploy an environment. So you can add services, you can relate services, configure services, expose them, and then finally deploy the environment. So that's just basic, deployment. But the really neat part about Amulet is that it creates these things called sentries, which are basically subordinate charms and another relation proxy charm. But the nice thing about those is that they let you inspect different things within the charms. So, for example, there's services or there's methods in this sentry class that's provided by Amulet that allow you to stat a file or directory on a charm service unit. You can return file or directory contents from a charm service unit. You can return relation data and values, for relations between charms. And it also allows you to run commands on the charm units or on the service units and get return codes back. So for example, the first charm we started working on is Keystone, and so some of the things that you can do with this is inspect the Keystone config file and return what's there, and then we can, some Python code, we can verify the default values and just default deployment and verify that they're correct. We can also verify. We can check that the right processes are running. Say you have Keystone charm up on MySQL charm, you can go in there and make sure that the right services are up and running. And like I said before, you can verify relation data. So if you have a MySQL charm and a Keystone charm, you can verify that the right relation data is being set between the two. The database name and the database user and stuff like that. There's all kinds of neat stuff that you can do with it. Liam actually has a test that he wrote, Liam Young, that allows you, for some of the charms like Keystone, when you update a Keystone config file, it'll restart the services after it updates the config file. And so using the stat, the ability to stat files and directories, you can verify that a process has been restarted based on times, last modified times. So that's basic gist of Amulet. In addition to that, we're taking a little further, obviously, to use some of the Openstack Python APIs. So, for example, for Keystone, we're going to use the Python Keystone client to do things like get a service catalog and endpoint data, to actually authenticate with the Keystone endpoint, with the default admin, add users, roles, tenants, so we can really verify that the databases are working, the relations are working, and all that. So it's pretty nice. So the charms are we're going to land these in the charm branches, in the individual OpenStack charm branches. But our goal, we're trying to create as much reusable code as possible, and hopefully that reusable code will end up falling into the charm helpers branch. And then our plan is really just to go through all the OpenStack charms, get the basic testing in place, and then we can move on, or at least look into creating more tests, like for HA or upgrades or SSL. But I think as long as we can get the basic tests in place, that's a good first pass.
Yeah, so thanks, Corey. That's a lot of detail, and I think this is a pretty cool approach. The reusable code, the class development, I think is important so that we have a framework to keep our tests in a kind of in parallel, if you will, as far as their design, and to not reinvent the wheel, so to speak. Just as an example, on a higher level, for example, the Keystone Charm test that we have together, and also a glance test, we'll do things like bring up a small OpenStack environment, add a new user, add a new tenant, add a new role, make sure that that user can obtain a new key, for example, or with the glance test that we can import a new image with the file-based backend. And then later we want to kind of figure out how we want to combine those tests with different storage backends and such. So there will be some overlap, I think, with a lot of these tests, but I do think that here in a short order we're going to have some significantly increased coverage on the OpenStack testing.
Excellent. So there were a couple of questions in panel just related to this. So Sparky Geek asked 2 questions in actual fact. One was, are these Amulet tests being run in CI, and where can I see the results? I answered that briefly, saying that's the plan, but not yet.
Correct.
Okay, good. I got that right. And he also asked a question about saying, is each charm tested in isolation?
Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, well, go ahead, Corey.
Yeah. Yeah. At this point, basically, so say we have a keystone charm, we've got a glance charm, we've got a step charm. The code, the Amulet tests are going to land in that charm branch, right? So if you're working on a keystone charm, obviously it's going to focus on testing the keystone, but it's also going to bring up some other charms like MySQL, you know, or maybe glance or something just to get an endpoint registered. But it's kind of just a subset of charms at a time. Maybe some of the charms like Nova, I don't think, it might have a lot more charms interacting, but not really an entire OpenStack deployment. So
One of the complicating factors here is that you really don't have much testing capability, perhaps in a real-world scenario, unless you have Keystone, for example, and some sort of database storage backend. So there's always going to be some overlap with those, and that's something that we have yet to determine as far as whether we'll be able to bring up just a Ceph charm, for example. And so I think that there's still some work to be done on that, and we're actively working on those determinations, throughout the team.
Yeah, one thing I'd add is just that the Amulet testing that we're doing right now is really kind of focused per charm, and that there's definitely room for more like system-tested OpenStack deployments that this is not covering.
Well, we're doing some
Right.
of that in our CI.
Right. So you have the Juju deployer that you can take an Icehouse trustee combination and deploy a full stack with Ceph and everything, right? And so that's the kind of stuff that is already in place, but that doesn't use Amulet. That's more of a manual kickoff type of test at the moment. So what we're working to do is write these Amulet tests per charm. Once we have that done, then we can kind of pull it all together into the mothership, if you will, the mothership deployment test to be able to throw branches against. So
yeah, and I think this is
early
a really good
part of this cycle. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, I think it's a really good approach in that you can have a more charm-centric test in Amulet, like you said, and I think I could see this. If we can get to this point in the cycle, would be pretty cool. But if say, for example, when a merge is proposed against one of our charms, that we run the Amulet test automatically, say, and the unit test, and provide that feedback to the reviewer to know that the change being proposed is not impacting the functions we have in Amulet. And then if the reviewer then approves, it could do a more complete test run, based on that act prior to automatically merging. That would be pretty awesome. I'd really like to get us away from having to manually merge changes. I think it would be pretty awesome to do like they do upstream in OpenStack and do this stuff.
Definitely so.
Cool. I'll shut up now and stop making work.
Okay, Pat, back to you.
Well, I think the one thing I want to make sure is that people understand that this is kind of extending our existing testing we're already doing, both in our CI and then also with oil. So I think that we're always trying to improve it, and I think this is going to be a great improvement to the testing that we do. So I had to throw that in, you guys.
Thank you.
Anyway, so then the next topic I want to talk about is talk about the neutron refactoring that Liam Young's doing early in the cycle. And Liam, I had muted you. Okay, you already unmuted yourself. So you want to describe a little bit why you're doing the neutron refactoring, what you're doing, and when it's showing up, because people are really interested in when neutron refactoring is landing. So I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Can you hear me? Okay.
You're a little bit quiet.
Oh, okay.
There.
That's better, is it?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'll physically move closer is obviously the key. So at the moment, particularly the Nova Cloud Controller is quite large because it looks after Nova services and it looks after Neutron services like the Neutron API service. And one of the goals with the refactoring is to split that out so that the Nova charms look after Nova and the Neutron charms look after Neutron, which hopefully should, in the fullness of time, make the charms a bit more manageable. In day one, the charm size actually gets a little bit bigger because we're trying to maintain backwards compatibility with the current setups. So although there are some new charms coming online for this, they're optional and the existing charms should still work. Another goal is to move the Neutron plugin code out to its own subordinate, which should make it easier for third parties to write their own Neutron plugin charms, and also means that we can stop maintaining the logic for those charms inside the principal charms. And another goal is to lay the groundwork for Nova Cell support, which will come after this. So that's what we're hoping to do, and then a little bit more detail on how we're doing that is, well, firstly, as I say, to move the plugins into separate subordinates, also to move the Neutron API service out to its own principal charm, and also to allow Neutron and Nova messaging to be split out into separate, well, in this case, rabbit queues, but whichever messaging bus you're using, which should allow, which will reduce the congestion on the messaging system, and that particular feature is the one that's going to allow us to then build cell support into the charms. So cell support is going to let us manage to divide very large number of compute nodes into distinct, discrete cells, with each cell having its own compute and Nova networking, not Nova networking, its own compute and cloud controller resources. Unfortunately, one of the limitations with cells is that Neutron isn't cell aware, so we still have to have a central Neutron server. So we still have a central Neutron gateway and API server, and each cell's compute node will plug in to the separate Neutron messaging bus. Is there any questions around that? That's all off the top of my head.
We might want to give folks I don't know quite how much the lag is between us talking live and people watching it live.
Oh, okay.
There's a small lag. I just don't know how big it is. So let's just give them a second in case there are any questions. Now I do have one for you. The Neutron refactoring, we're hoping to get that because you've, I think, pretty much completed the development of that at this point.
Yeah. So so it's I have a question about the architect. Well, a small decision I think we need to talk about who owns the neutron.conf. I've had some chats with James Page about this, but I'm going to send an email out today or tomorrow to the mailing list just to say this is what I've done. I think this is the right decision. You know, does anybody else have any feedback on that? Assuming there's no major, nothing major comes out of that, then I'll be at the point of adding some unit tests and amulet tests, but the code is there for the refactoring at the moment, and I'll publish that again on the mailing list
Right. So I think your goal is to kind of, I think we were trying to shoot for end of this week, right, to have this
Sure,
stuff.
yeah. Yeah, for trying it out, yeah.
Okay. Uh, so it looks like the only other question was about timing of this too.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So I think the next topic is, so continuing with the networking theme, just to talk a little bit about multiple networks. And James, I think that's you.
It is, yeah.
That's what people are planning to add this cycle. So.
Yeah. So this has come up internally within Canonical several times in the last 6 to 9 months, and customers have been asking for it. And I've had increasing numbers of questions on IRC about. So these Openstack Charms are great, but how do I make stuff run on different networks? So I want my tenant data traffic between compute instances on compute nodes to run over this network, and I want all my API traffic to run on this network, etc., etc., etc. So right now, Charms don't support that. They do everything over ETH0. So you can your tenants could quite easily generate lots of network traffic and kill API performance or database performance or messaging performance or whatever it is. So it's quite an important feature to work into the Charms. So let me just, I can't find the picture. I have a kind of proposed network reference architecture, which is really based on.
I'll find that, James.
Yeah, some of the upstream best practice from the OpenStack operations guide. And from experience of deployments that we've had within Canonical, to kind of rationalize what can sometimes be extreme network splits into what we think is a sensible reference architecture.
It's just a reference architecture. They would
Yeah.
still be able to specify what particular network they want to put a service.
Yeah, so it's fairly flexible in terms of what you can do still. But it's kind of best practice that I think we should be aiming for. So it really does some sensible things. So it splits out storage traffic, splits out tenants into instance traffic. It splits out public API access and internal API calls, messaging and database. It just allows for more separation. What I'm proposing to do in the Charms is not make the Charms configure the network interfaces. I'm making the assumption that whatever is provisioning the servers that you're going to be using is going to be networking them correctly. So if it's MAS, then you need to add in appropriate curtain install hooks to be able to configure the networks on the servers, and then the Charm will then do auto discovery of network interfaces based on provided configuration options, and we'll start routing traffic over the specified networks if they are found. If they are not found, it will revert back to ETH0. So we don't end up with broken behavior, but we get better behavior if servers have the right types of network connection. I pushed this into some Ceph branches because this is one of the kind of key things from a storage perspective that we need to do. So if anybody's interested, and I'll put them in the pad, I've got three branches of Ceph, which split the Ceph. Well, they model the Ceph Charms based on the upstream reference architecture of Ceph, which is basically to have a public access network, which is where your clients access their storage, and then to have a cluster network where OSDs, object storage daemons, do resyncs. So basically, the recovery of a server failure in a Ceph cluster doesn't impact on client performance too much from a networking perspective. It will from an IOPS perspective still, but you won't start choking the public the public channel to for clients to be able to do resyncs and stuff like that. So this is something we're intending on delivering this cycle. I think it's going to be a bit of a slow burn over the next 6 months to get this in. I'm working on some innovative ways to test it using our Openstack or Notistack testing stuff, but it's a little fiddly at the moment. It needs a bit more automation. So hopefully we'll have something kind of towards the kind of second, third, no, the third third of the cycle for people to look at. It may come a little bit quicker on that if we get other people working on it, but for the time being, we've just got the picture, which Pat's linked in the document as well. Cool. Any questions?
I think you've got a question. Oh, okay. There's questions about Trove.
Okay, there's two questions. There's two questions in channel. One was, can OpenStack Charmers at list.launchpad.net be opened up for everyone to join? That's a really good point, because currently you have to be a member of that team, which means you can push branches. Okay, let's have an action to sort out a more general mailing list for OpenStack Charm development that anybody can join as an independent entity from Launchpad.
Yeah, I think we don't want to necessarily open that one up, but we probably want something else.
I think we need a list that's
Okay.
appropriate, so let's get that sorted out. And the other question was around
It's about
Trove.
Trove. Yeah. Maddie W. Trove is mentioned in the pad. What are the plans for this charm? So I think that's basically our next topic. So if you just want to
Yeah, sure.
kind of go answer that question.
Let me just check. It probably will be available. I say probably. That is so like I need a get out clause. It's on the list for charming this cycle. I doubt that anybody will get to it till later in cycle, is the honest truth. So I would expect that again at kind of third of the cycle, so last couple of months of the cycle. A lot of that work will be tied into whether Trove goes into main. So at the moment, although we do touch the Trove packages, we don't touch them in any significant way. If they go into main, then we need a way of effectively testing them. Otherwise, we can't do stable release updates. And the way we test stuff is to deploy stuff with Juju. So we need an effective way to deploy Trove, so a charm will appear so that we can actually do SRUs. But that might not appear until towards the end of the cycle.
And James, once it goes into main, that's when we would charm it.
Yeah, it should go. We should have a charm as part of that piece of work. It doesn't mean that things in Universe don't get charms. It just means that it would be a priority piece rather than a stretch goal. Okay.
Trove is an integrated project this release.
It's an integrated project, but is it a core project?
It's core, I think.
It was integrated for Icehouse, but
right.
Is it going core for Juno? I don't know.
Yeah, I'll double check.
Yeah, so that's
Okay.
what was my other piece I was gonna mention, was that when it would go into main is when it becomes core. That's kind of our.
That's our normal trigger, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that probably answers the Trove question, hopefully. Should we talk about alternative hypervisor support now?
Yeah.
Sandy?
Yeah. Go for it, James.
Okay, so we've got two kind of completely new hypervisors coming in. One is support for VMware vSphere deployments. So OpenStack for a couple of cycles now has had integration in Nova Compute that allows you to manage instances within a vSphere cluster via the OpenStack APIs using the standard APIs and glance images and stuff like that. So we're doing some work around that to enable that. As part of that piece, we're also looking at integrating block storage. So there's a Cinder backend that we can enable for vSphere as well, which allows you to provision storage from a vSphere cluster to keep instances running within a vSphere cluster. So I'm working on those two pieces at the moment. The VMware charm, the Nova Compute VMware charm, which is what we're calling it, kind of rolls off the tongue, but we need some way of identifying these things. We'll support two networking modes, Nova Network in flat DHCP mode, which I have working, and it will also support Neutron via the NSX or NVP plugins. They are both the same thing, it's just a rename. So the plan is that we should have those things working probably in the next, well, it should be in the next 2 weeks. We should have those up and running.
And this is just
extending
extending the existing charm.
Well, I'm actually introducing a new charm for the Nova Compute node.
Okay. Okay.
We originally targeted integrating it into Nova Compute, but I started working on this a couple of days ago, and it's actually a really simple charm. There's not much to it. It doesn't need to be in Nova Compute, so I've pulled it apart and made it a separate charm. Maybe slightly controversial, but it was going to get lost in the Nova Compute charm, which is actually quite complicated. But with because it's really just a gateway. All it does is push glance images into vSphere, start instances. It does do some Nova networking stuff if you happen to be running in that mode, but nothing too extraordinary. So I think it's same as a separate charm. Which kind of leads on to the other thing we're doing, which is some charm work around Power 8, which I'm going to let Chuck talk about because he's been delivering that piece.
Chuck, who's losing his voice a bit.
Yes. So the Power 8 charm basically is a compute proxy which allows you to connect via to deploy the copies all the configuration files that you need, installs the RPM via Fabric, and just syncs everything back up. Right now it supports the IBM hypervisor that IBM supports, and it's basically copies the configuration files from proxy that we've deployed via Juju and installs everything for you. And it's pretty much done already. It needs to be reviewed by someone other than me, and it should be ready to go.
Excellent, Chuck.
Chuck, could you put the branch into the other pad? So if interested people want to have a look, they can do so.
Sure.
Cool.
All right. So I know, James, one topic. Do we want to talk at all about? I think we've just started talking about the plans to potentially make it so that the charms can actually pull from Openstack kit.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
I know we've just started talking about it, so this is kind of not a prepared topic, more of a discussion.
Yeah, and yeah, so this is quite a significant deviation from the way the charms work today. So one of the things we've been talking about kind of in the background for a couple of cycles is having the ability to not deploy from packages, so to deploy from branches, Git repositories, whatever, for the OpenStack deployments in a Juju managed deployment. Sounds like quite a new feature. Seems like quite a neat way to be able to, test deploy a set of changes in a branch in a Git repository. Sounds like a good idea. The big gotcha is that there's quite a bit in the packages that isn't in upstream, upstream configurations, that sort of stuff. That we need to work around. So we need to come up with a specific approach on how to achieve this. And it kind of feels like a kind of second charm within an existing charm. So that the way you're going to pull code from Git and install dependencies is going to be very different to how we do it via packages. Although I think a lot of the kind of configuration template rendering can be shared, I think the kind of install approach needs to be quite radically different.
So James, is there a way for us to get away with, not having to have a charm without it in a charm, but actually potentially packaging up the latest, and so we use our existing methods? Is that crazy?
We could do that, but I think I mean ultimately most of OpenStack is Python, so it's an interpreted language. and I think we're just putting an extra hop in there. And if we can get something that deploys from branch, then it's more DevStack-like. So if upstream update their dependencies, it's just they're just installing from pip. So by pip. So we can deal with that easier than we can if we try and put things through like a packaging filter first to generate packages as part of the deployment process. I did consider that as an approach, but I think it probably doesn't give us the agility that is the real benefit of this process. I mean, we have existing processes that build from trunk or build from branch that can build packages. I'm not sure that should be part of the charm itself. I think the real win on this is if we can deploy straight from the upstream repositories into user local or opt or wherever the heck these things would install. I think it's quite a distinctly different install process to the packaging. I just know how often our packaging branch breaks against upstream trunk, so I think that's probably a fairly fragile way to do it.
Understood. I think it's just something, when you hear you're going to end up having to have kind of a charm within a charm. I'm not trying to figure it out.
It might not be that bad, but it will definitely increase the complexity of the charms. So I think having good tests for the existing function is really key here, because we need to make sure we're not regressing the existing package-based deploy before we introduce a new feature like that, because it has the potential for significant disruption. So.
Yeah, and I think the plan is for Corey to, after, as he finishes up the amulet stuff here, is to kind of prototype up the potential solution and see how hard it actually is versus what our gut is telling us. So.
Yeah, I was just going to point out, I think one of the other advantages is, when we're working on upstream bugs, to be able to actually just pick your Git repository with your fixes in it and just be able to run with that. That'll be a really nice thing to be able to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a real win, because DevStack allows you to do things on a single box. That doesn't capture all use cases for bugs. So having some, if we can deploy from branches like we deploy in production, well, as closely as possible as we can deploy in production, testing a fix for a multi-node bug becomes much easier. So I think there's some interesting challenges there. So for example, I think on any given OpenStack service unit, you're going to have requirement for multiple sources of code. So Keystone client, whatever it might be, there could be all sorts of things there. So we probably need a nice way of being able to specify these repositories, so you can overlay your repository for a Nova fix against upstream Splance and Cinder and stuff like that. So I think some sort of YAML or JSON definition of the source of truth you want to test would be pretty cool. Or deploy. Sorry, this is not testing, this is deployment. So. Cool, good luck. I really look forward to this. Terrifies the heck out of me.
Sounds fun. I'll leave my stupid questions for offline.
Okay.
No. Oh well, no. You got it.
There are no stupid questions.
There are no. I'm keeping the bar low, man.
No. I've actually thought about this before you even mentioned it. I was just kind of wondering, how could we do that? And I know it definitely seems useful.
So Tribal did ask a question in channel earlier about streamlining changes to charm helpers. So at the moment we sync charm helpers into the charms as and when we need to pick up a change from charm helpers. Now we do have a stable branch for our stable charms of charm helpers, so that we don't pick up every change that's going into charm helpers, so we can cherry pick there as well. But I think once we've got some good testing in place, we probably can get a bit more automated with regular syncing of charm helpers trunk into into our next branches at least, which I think would be a really good thing to do. So let's get the testing in place first, and then we can look at having some sort of regular or based on a commit happening to charm helpers that then, you know, basically generates a branch that gets tested and then proposed for merge into our next, and it's just an easy accept. Then it could be something that's really quite automatic. It'd be quite nice, wouldn't it? So, just think of the scale we can achieve.
Anyway, okay. And so, any other topics this morning or afternoon, evening, wherever you are, time sunrise? All right. Well, we got a lot of work to do, so we better. I'll let you guys do it, even though we have another session in a few minutes. So, have a wonderful day. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Bye.